Hi, everyone. Just wanted to welcome everyone to the January 2023 meeting of the Homeless Prevention and Response System. Uh, we're going to start off with a land acknowledgement and a mission moment. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture and appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. The Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness and the HPRS Advisory Council would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina. We have a two-part mission moment today. I just wanted to start off acknowledging, and Allison isn't able to join us, acknowledging and recognizing the vast community support of the work down at the Sullivan for the homeless shelter down there. There has been an outpouring of community support around food security and meals for the people experiencing homelessness that are accessing services at the Sullivan Arena and at the Warming Center. And just wanted to take this time to be able to thank them if they're in this meeting with us and if they happen to watch this in the future. But it really has been such a great experience to be able to see that outpouring of support. And then I'm going to hand off to Yvonne, who has a mission moment to share from the ACH staff standpoint.
Yvonne, you're muted.
Okay, all right, let me try that again. So today I wanted to just talk about being grateful for the partnerships that we have been able to leverage in support of a couple of families that have been in a building that was condemned, and we had to rapidly relocate folks and try and address their unique needs. And with the partnership with LHP as well as United Way and a little bit of Bezos as well, we have been able to house at least almost three families in a very short period of time. And so I'm very grateful for all of the partners that are on this call, as well as colleagues, and definitely the programs that we're working with to help these folks not have to go to a shelter due to no fault of their own. So that was it.
Thank you.
Jessica, can I just add something?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I don't have the raise hand function right now, but Yvonne is so humble. One of the things that happened with this collaboration is we had a single adult who was older, and through Yvonne's connection to do an appeal for a Widener property, was able to get into an apartment that was larger, obviously not a condemned building, so that's a great point. But her reaction to being able to be helped and being able to find a unit that fit her needs, and then also given the tools like budgeting, helping her money stretch, and like Yvonne said, with United Way, being able to pay the security deposit and first month's rent, her funds, her low income funds now actually stretch to where she is paid ahead, Yvonne, by like a month and a half of rent every single month. Yes. And so the joy that she feels, I hope is something that all of you feel, that our programs do work. And although ACH doesn't do the direct service, by collaborating with all of you, we are able to connect clients to those wonderful services and provide that great outcome. So thanks, and sorry for my hard breathing.
Thank you, Taria. And I will say from my standpoint with my role at Rural Cap, it has been very eye-opening and very humbling to be on the side of shelter and the side of family shelter specifically. So I've really enjoyed also learning and meeting and being able to be part of all of these wonderful partnerships that exist and continue to be built and grow through this process. All right, moving to the general HPRS updates. Oh, I see there's a question from Laura in the chat. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure if Taria does or.
I do.
Oh,
so unfortunately, that landlord continues to attempt to rent these units that are completely substandard and uninhabitable. Code enforcement continues to work the various mechanisms in order to try to prevent that. Ultimately, code enforcement is a complaint-driven mechanism, so there's not much to. You can't take the property away from the person. And so what he does with it is unfortunate. So hopefully that process will move quickly and smoothly, and they can figure out ways to possibly maybe enjoin, like get a court order to stop the rental of uninhabitable units. But that's an extraordinary measure to be taken by local government. So unfortunately, we just have to keep our eyes open and think about ways to try to avoid this property as well as other properties by this landlord. This landlord does have a reputation in town. If you're thinking of hooking a client up with a unit and you are not, if you're worried, something doesn't seem right, reach out to Yvonne and Taria. They know the network. I'm not going to besmirch anyone on a public meeting, but I think I want to give you that resource of Yvonne and Taria. They know who's working with folks and what are good fits. So please reach out to them. Thanks.
Thanks, Meg. And I think I would add to that as well, something that I've found really helpful is being able to search property records on the Muni website as well. So sometimes it's as simple as something doesn't feel quite right and you look up who the owner of that property is, and then you very quickly realize why something didn't feel right, or it helps you to identify some trends. So that's been really helpful for me to have that tool available online and easily searchable. General HPRS updates. I think Meg is going to talk about some of this in her ACH report also, but just wanted to give a kudos out to the ACH staff for pulling together the housing summit earlier this month. I think that was a wonderful opportunity to get to collaborate and brainstorm together and network and meet people who are behind some of these programs that we all know exist, but we may not have known some of the details of. So I think that was a wonderful opportunity. I think I look forward to more of them. Hopefully it's something that we can make happen on a more regular basis. That is not calling out ACH to do that. I think it's on us to be able to put together these types of requests and figure out ways that we can make stuff like that happen. The other one that I wanted to thank people for their attendance and participation on is the Emergency Shelter Task Force that has been meeting and really working through some of the challenges that exist around providing emergency cold weather shelter, and also thinking about what happens after that. So just appreciate that space is available and appreciate everyone who has been participating in that space and in that process. We don't have any past meeting action items for follow-up, and give a brief overview of what the committees have been working on. The Community Prioritization Committee has been, or I'm sorry, the Compliance Committee has been working on a process for grantee monitoring. So people who receive ESG and COC funds, the COC has a space to be able to do that type of oversight. So working through that process, and look forward to hearing more from them as they build that out. The Community Prioritization Committee has been working on the gap analysis, and then looking forward to working on the updates to Anchored Home Now. So the gap analysis is on the agenda and will be presented later on in the meeting. And the Data Committee and Coordinated Entry Committee did not have any updates for this month. So on that, I will hand off to Meg for the ACE report.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am going to go in reverse order as I was on the slide. So operationally, I want to build on what Jessica said about the Housing Summit. So it was a wild success. We had a great time. We learned so much from one another, good dynamic conversation, nearly 100 participants each day. Using the hybrid model really seemed to work well. And it was really a general overview of kind of where we're at with the status of housing, leases, how we can leverage the use of leases and supportive services. We really shared a lot of information with one another of like where we're getting stuck and how we might problem solve that. And then a huge shout out to HUD Regional Administrator Margaret Salazar for giving our opening remarks. She really set a great tone, focused on housing. HUD is focused on housing. We are focused on housing. So it was really fantastic. We plan to hold 5 more of these in 2023, and they're going to get a little bit more specific. We hope to hold one on policy and invite policymakers. We hope to hold one on data and how data both is useful tool in utilizing HMIS for client notes, but also how it is a predictive tool for making system capacity decisions. And then healthcare is another specific topic. So we really look forward to continuing these conversations. We got a lot out of it as well as the coalition staff. So super excited. Additionally, for operational updates, the PIT count is next week. That is really driven by the outreach teams. There's a volunteer event on Monday night to help put together some care packages. And we've been really fortunate to partner with the restaurant program at United Way to have burritos for individuals. And then the downtown partnership with regard to kind of getting in touch with folks who tend to stay downtown before office hours, and people tend to spread out from there. So it is a busy end of month here at the coalition. We'll also be releasing Anchored Home for a public comment engagement period. We're going to be spending some time with the committees of the advisory council, as well as community councils, holding a town hall, really talking about our strategic plan for the next 5 years. Spoiler alert, it's all about housing. So it's just the different ways we want to think about housing and how we want to measure our outcomes and, how we're doing towards that goal. We are really focused on the solution. So watch for that. If you're getting our weekly digest, you'll see when that draft is out. What we're hoping to do is figure out a way to collect comments and feedback so then we can specifically respond to the comments and feedback we're receiving. And so that way you'll know how, if you commented, how that was considered and if it was incorporated, if it wasn't incorporated. And I just want to kind of preview as well. This is a strategic plan from, a 30,000 foot view, and then we'll dive in deeper with work groups to really get at some of the specific methods of achieving the overall goal. The Emergency Shelter Task Force is also busy. They convened this last Monday, really going to walk alongside the municipality as it brings its demobilization plans forward at the Committee on Housing and Homelessness yesterday. Assemblyman Rivera previewed kind of his drawdown numbers. So we're hoping to take that information with what the municipality has and put it to the work group to really think about it, first starting with data as a subcommittee of that task force, then bringing it to the full task force for feedback or for presentation and some time to digest, and then ultimately some feedback and hopefully reaching consensus that there's a community consensus on how, what the demobilization of emergency cold weather shelter is going to look like. Right now, it's slated to end at the end of March, and I raised in the committee meeting yesterday, it's traditionally been online through the end of April. So I think that's one point we can also start to look at. As for government updates, just give you a preview. The legislative program the coalition has in terms of education is really centered around VHAP and SNUG funding to getting those up to, speed with inflation. They've been flat funded for many years. And really working with the legislature on how those are integral pieces to the work we do, how those sustain housing programs, and really braid well with the COC funding that's here. You may have seen my first comment about braiding and leveraging resources. I am all about braiding and leveraging resources. And I think that's what we want to talk with policymakers about. What resources do you have to bring to the table, or do you fund? How do we make sure that those are adequate to not only meet the need, but be leveraged with other sources of funding? So we are working on some fact sheets that we can hopefully share network wide. So if you have an opportunity to go to Juneau, or you're spending time with a legislator who's worried about housing and homelessness, I think it's no secret there's a statewide housing crisis, and it really affects the work that we do. So I think that's it for updates. Happy to take any questions or a prompt if I missed something you were hoping to hear about.
Thank you, Meg. Opening it to any questions or comments anyone might have. You can feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and ask the question, or can put it in the chat if it's something that you'd like read out loud. All right, not hearing any questions. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I did put in the chat a link to the resources from the Housing Summit. So there was a document created that was all of the presentations from the Housing Summit that was a really good resource for me, since there was so much information shared during that day the 2 days that I wanted to be able to go back and review. So I found it super helpful, wanted to share it out with everybody else. All right, we will now move to our special presentation. I'm so excited to introduce Will Walker, who is the staff attorney for Access to Justice, working with the Alaska court system, and he's going to talk to us today about the eviction diversion program.
Thank you so much for the welcome, Jessica, and thank you all to the council for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my program, the program that I'm working on here at the Alaska court system, the eviction diversion program. Let's see, am I able to share my screen?
I was just about to ask you, Will. Hi, this is the host. I'm going to go ahead and make you co-host. Just bear with me just a moment.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, see if that allows you to share your screen.
Yes, it does.
All right, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Okay. So just as a general overview for the program, thank you again for the introduction, Jessica. I'm Will Walker. I'm staff attorney here with the Alaska court system. Basically, the court system received funding through the National Center for State Courts to start an eviction diversion program. And we're one of 12 courts across the country to have received one of these grants. They also just released an additional funding round for additional courts to apply, but so far we're of the first 12. And ours is the only one to be a statewide program, which is an exciting opportunity. It's also notable that it's a voluntary program. So I think there might have been some confusion initially that thinking that it was a mandatory court program or something like that, but it's voluntary. So we need buy-in from both landlords and tenants to participate. The program's open both before and after a formal eviction case has been started in court, but we're trying to encourage participation as early as possible, as we think that there are greater possibilities for better resolutions earlier on there's an intervention. So kind of the key and main pillar of the program is encouraging mediation as an alternative option to kind of the full formal court process. Again, it is available either before or after the case has been filed, but we want it to be an alternative to kind of getting that eviction judgment at the end of an eviction case. Through the program, the Supreme Court has authorized the administrative director at the court in consultation with the Supreme Court to implement some provisional court rules to help with the implementation of the program, and I'll discuss those in just a few minutes. In addition to the mediation component, I see there has been kind of three other buckets of significant program components. First is outreach, getting the word out that the program exists and that's available to landlords and tenants is, of course, key, as if people don't know about the program, then we aren't able to help. In some of the court rules, we'll get to this too, but we're also hoping to work to establish relationships and with service providers, landlord groups, attorney and mediation groups, and other stakeholders in the community, as well as trying to do our best to get information to tenants and landlords where they're at through community outreach. And we welcome all suggestions for how to do that. Another one of these additional components is legal information. We think that the better informed people are about the eviction process, about landlord-tenant law and the rights and responsibilities for both landlords and tenants, the better equipped people are either for a mediation, if it goes to a court case, or just to handle situations before there's any court involvement at all. We think that that is better, and so we're trying to improve the resources available with the court website and work with service providers to help them know about the process and the law and see what we can do for community education as well. One component that we're hoping to implement on the website will be guided interviews to help guide landlords and tenants through the process. Finally, a key component is connecting people with community resources. I kind of see my role as in part being that to triage people as they come through and helping to connect them with resources and services that they need as they're coming through the program. And so the better informed we are here at the court about the resources available, the better we are able to do that. So I had mentioned that there are some provisional rule changes, and so this is a summary of what some of those changes will look like. Again, outreach is a key component, and so the first set of rules addresses that. And so you can see on the right kind of an example of what these information sheets will look like. But basically, one of the requirements will be that landlords at a few different stages in the eviction process will be required to include these information sheets. And these have information about the eviction process and the different stages, what actions a person can take, legal information and advice resources from the court and ALSC, and then a link to the program webpage and a sign-up form to begin participating. And so those will be required to be provided to the tenant at the notice to quit stage, as well as with the complaint and summons. So kind of the initial kind of pre-filing stage, and then once the case is opened. Another requirement will be with the filing for the landlords to include the tenant's contact information when they open a case. And this is so us here at the court, especially me, can reach out to the tenants to let them know about the program once an eviction case has been filed, because otherwise we wouldn't have access to that contact information. Additionally, one of the rules will remove from the public access version of court view the cases if they were closed without an eviction judgment. And as you all are all aware of the impacts that having an eviction on the record can have, we're trying to through the mechanisms we have access to see if we can reduce that for people who are not having a case that ends in an eviction and are might be reaching an agreement or otherwise a case being dismissed. And the final thing is just more of a technicality, is just ensuring that the mediations through the program are held confidential, and so people can be open and speak their minds without feeling like they'll be used against them in court down the line. It'll only be the agreement, if they reach an agreement, that would be able to be used as a court document. So one question we get is why mediate, especially from kind of a landlord perspective, but I'm a big advocate for alternative dispute resolution, which includes mediation in general. And I think that parties can find better avenues and better solutions to their disputes through processes like mediation. So as you all know, the negative effects that evictions have, again, it can prevent access to public benefits for 5 years. And so trying to encourage resolution short of that is obviously a major, would be a major positive, especially for the tenants. But for both parties, it can save time and money instead of potentially hiring an attorney, paying court fees, and going through the formal process. If a resolution could be found short of that, that can save everyone time and money, as well as the stress of having to go to court and kind of go through again the whole process. One of the benefits of mediation is it provides the space and opportunity for parties to reach creative solutions. It allows the parties to reach agreements that wouldn't be accessible if through the eviction process, because of course limited in what it can order. Basically, you know, ordering the tenant to move out and make payments or dismiss the case. But through mediation, the parties can reach an agreement that might work better for them and that might have more certainty of agreeing on a move out date, and if the tenant needs to move out, or ideally, potentially some situations where the tenant can stay. And mediation as a process supports party autonomy, which is an important value, and again, helps enable people to have more control over their disputes and over their situations, rather than leaving it to a judge to ultimately decide everything. Next, how you all can be helpful with this program, because we see it as, you know, just being a piece of the puzzle to try to, you know, work on improving housing stability in our community. And so spreading the word about the program, referring landlords and tenants, letting them know that the program exists, that's incredibly helpful. If you're a landlord, whether in an organizational or an individual capacity, using the program as another tool in the toolkit to before going through the eviction process, we definitely welcome that. Again, helping us know what resources and services are available in the community that we can refer people to as they're going through the process. So, you know, I'd imagine there might be people who agree to a move out date, and so anything that could help them find, you know, additional housing or bridging that time from when they have that time period to find a new place, to reduce people who reduce people living without a home. And so this can include rental assistance, help finding housing, moving transportation, financial assistance programs like Ready to Rent, social services, anything like that. I'd love to be connected with intake staff to discuss kind of the best way to make those referrals and to ensure that we have a good relationship with the service providers, that we're sending people to organizations that have capacity to help, and that we're making sure to send people that meet eligibility criteria as best we can. Again, legal information is a key component of the program. And so if there are questions that you all are seeing in the community that landlords are asking, that tenants are asking, if we can, better address those on the court website or through our resources, we'd love to hear how we can better do that. And finally, feedback. We see this as an iterative process, and we want to keep making the program better as we go. And so we'd love to hear any thoughts and ideas on how we can keep improving, and want to be responsive to all stakeholders and the needs of the community. If there's time, I'm happy to answer questions now. Also, I have my email and phone number here. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out if anyone has questions, ideas, comments, feedback. Happy to hear any of that.
Thank you so much, Will. Anyone who has any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat. You can unmute, raise your hand if you have them. Thank you so much for this presentation. I loved hearing the information at the Housing Summit. I've learned so much from this, and am really excited to have this resource available to us.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak here, and to ACEH for the opportunity to speak at the Housing Summit. And I'll echo also the thoughts about just how great I thought the Housing Summit was. And it's amazing to see the energy in the community behind improving housing stability and the importance of housing. And so it's really heartening to see that drive within the community. Okay, I'm seeing a few questions.
Do you see the question in the chat?
Yes. First, what are the negatives to mediate? Again, it's probably going to be somewhat, case by case. I think in general, mediation is going to, I think there's a likelihood that mediation leads to better outcomes for most parties than the alternative of going through the court process. And I think that exists for both landlords and tenants. Through the program as it exists, there's not a mechanism to slow down or stop the court process. It's again a voluntary program up to the parties. So there could be the possibility that it might move a little bit slower than the court process. So that could be a negative for landlords, but we're hoping to get the mediations on as soon as possible so that it wouldn't discourage landlords to participate and try this before going through the process. And I'm happy to, I believe I shared, and I'm happy to share this presentation with whoever to distribute. Is another question I'm saying.
Will, you can, I'll put our email address in the chat box and you can send it to me.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And on this slide right here, you can see Will's email address as well, as his phone number. If you think of questions later and want to reach out, I'm sure you can shoot an email that direction and he'll get back to you.
Yes, please do. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. And I do see the question, the earlier question in the chat that I think may have been directed at the ACH staff about accessing the programs that are going to be ending in March, and if there's any way that the information about who qualifies and who might be able to access them before the programs end.
Are you referring to the emergency cold weather shelter? Because those are the programs right now slated to end in March. Is emergency cold weather shelter is best to our understanding. Okay, so emergency cold weather shelter is at 3 primary locations. Well, 2 really. For single adults, there's the Alex and the Sullivan. The best point of access is Sullivan Arena. I believe the Alex Hotel also takes walk-ups, but I believe it's been full for some time. Emergency cold weather shelter for families is referral through 211 and then awake after 5 p.m. And then transition age youth, Covenant House has been doing emergency cold weather shelter and a day program, just access through their location downtown. So all of those, Alex takes walk-ups, great. Thanks, Andy. So those are the ways to access those through the end of March. And I believe emergency cold weather families is actually on an agreement through the end of April. Andy, do you want to talk about which ones are through the end of April versus the end of March? Because I understand the Sullivan is currently contracted through the end of March.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a new headset, so I've been reluctant to use it because it may not work. All of our emergency cold weather shelters under 16.120 are through April 30th of 2023. So the Alex, the Aviator, Covenant House, and yes. Sorry, I'm thinking of because there's like they're all contracted through April 30th. We do not do any emergency cold weather shelters that would end before April 30th.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. That was different information than given out during the health department's presentation at the committee meeting yesterday. So I appreciate the clarification. I hope that answered the question. If there's follow-up, certainly happy to try.
All right, thank you so much for that. If there's more questions in the chat, we can catch them and tag people in. Next, we are going to have a discussion about the gap analysis. And I believe between Katie and Celia, we're going to have that information shared, and we'll have an opportunity for discussion and questions about the gap analysis.
Thanks, Jessica. I can tee this up and then pass it over to Celia, who deserves the credit for actually doing all of the work that you'll see. At a high level, the gap analysis is a HUD requirement to put out to the community, something that captures the gap in our community in terms of demand for housing and then supply or capacity for housing. So the difference between those in our community. If folks remember our previous form of the gap analysis that we put out in, I think, 2021 was a similar table capturing this gap by different housing types or levels of need, and then by different populations. And so the immediate task of our committee, and really just was reviewing the work of ACH staff, was to produce an updated version based on the latest data that we can share out with the community and use as part of our communications and kind of strategic decisions. This is something that will inform things like anchored home and be found in that community plan. So today in our session, the advisory council members voted to approve this. So this is just hot off the presses. And I think Celia is just going to walk through at a pretty high level what this is and how we got there, but excited to share this and then to start sharing it more widely.
Yeah. This is one of the issues around HUD that seems like a super easy, no problem. You just do the work and the work is done, and not a challenging thing to do. It's really a supply and demand calculation. You take how many people you need to serve, and you say, here's how many units we currently have, and you just do simple math, and then that should be it. Of course, when you actually start to dig into it, it becomes much more complicated really quickly. So most people get into social services because there are some math people and some not math people. I am not a math person, so I'll do my best to talk about how we got to the math without using too much mathy language around it. So on the face, that is what we did. We started with the supply, which is calculated based on length of stay in days, which is based on some HMIS data. We took the inventory counts. Most of them are based off of housing inventory count data, and then some truing up with actual numbers in the community, knowing there's some wonkery with the inventory counts and the way those are sort of done. Then you do some math to calculate your capacity calculation, so your length of stay times your inventory, to sort of say how many days can you actually have folks run. Then on the demand side, we started by using Built for Zero data, which is HMIS data. They're in the same kind of category, but using the by name list from Built for Zero. And then we can just keep it up on the top number, for now.
Okay, so
the demand percentages
prescription
were calculated using some brain fart there. Were calculated using HMIS data, and then using some best practice knowledge and talking with subject matter experts in the community. So you take your sort of total demand of the universe, and then your demand percentages, and you get to people. Then you calculate how long those people need to stay. So you use a similar length of stay calculation, and then you get to the gap. The part that I think is also worth talking about in this group is the veterans calculation. So on the display here, it's glaringly obvious that there's zeros in the category. That doesn't mean that there's no need for veteran services in our community. The weird part, or the strange part, is veterans are often not in the same binary category that you see single adults or families or youth in TAY. So for example, you're often a veteran and a single adult, or you're often a veteran who's a head of household or a member of a family. Whereas for the rest of the categories, it's a binary choice. Like you're either a single adult, or you're in a family, or you're a youth, because of the way that works. So that throws off some of the calculations when you just try and do the math around it. So the veteran demand capacity is assumed to be absorbed in the other systems in the absence of a smarter mathematical way to calculate that need. That's a really basic overview. I want to pause and ask if there are other high-level questions now.
And if anyone has questions, you can unmute and just ask them, or put them in the chat, and we can capture them that way as well.
And to echo what Celia said, or maybe didn't give herself full credit for, there is a lot of work that goes into producing what ends up looking like a relatively simple table. And so first, a big thank you to Celia and the ACH team for a lot of time put into this. We also talked at the advisory council. I think this table is a static snapshot that both kind of meets HUD requirements, but also gives us a really good place to work from. As a committee, we talked about what would it look like to have a version of the gap analysis that's more dynamic, that we're able to put out more frequently. So just a note that in some ways this is just starting that conversation. And so this is awesome to have. And also as a committee and with ACH, we will be continuing to talk about what does it look like to get something out maybe more regularly on this front. Meg, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in from kind of a really high level here, as I explained to the Committee on Housing and Homelessness, that these numbers shouldn't feel surprising to anyone, I don't think. 210 permanent year-round shelter beds, whether those are transitional housing, congregate shelter, non-congregate shelter. I think it was really summed up well in the committee yesterday by Assemblymember Constant saying, oh, this is our dispersed coordinated shelter system we've been wanting to build in Anchorage, low barrier shelter. And I think that he's absolutely right. 2,400 housing units is a large number, but we chip at that 1 unit, 8 units, 100 units at a time. And I think that really keeps our focus on housing. So I think this can be used not only for our planning purposes, but also to help drive the policy considerations and the investments in the community. And that's to that end that we really want to do that in collaboration with all of you. I think it shows that we also need to continue to focus heavily on housing and continue to have conversations about housing and how we can break any barriers that exist to bringing more units online. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Meg. I think that's exactly right. I think the number looks big, but it is also good in that it specifies what we're working towards and clearly highlights housing as the need across. And that was a conversation we had as well in the committee, that we're seeing that across types of housing, sort of different groups and different people. And so we just need to keep talking about and working towards the housing solutions. I think that's it from my end. Celia, I don't know if you have anything else from yours.
I think that's a good, I think this is the good high level overview that I'd like to leave everybody with to think about. Oh, I see there's something in the chat.
Yeah, there's a few questions in the chat. I don't know if that's something that Celia, you or Katie want to grab, or if that's something Meg wants to capture.
At the macro level for the gap analysis, the disabled LGBTQ employed part of that is not captured in this specific part of the gap analysis, but because it's in HMIS as the data system, we have some ability to dive a little deeper into it. The other part of this is the more complex, the more like verticals you add to this type of chart, the more complex it becomes and the harder it becomes for the layperson to digest, or it just adds a different level of complexity. Which of the categories is the best guest house? I believe all the hotel conversions that are being discussed would fit into the independent unit category. I'm not involved with those. So Meg, Meg or somebody else, if you're from ACH who has a little more familiarity with that, does that sound accurate to you?
Can you say it one more time?
The hotel conversions are all planned to be permanent housing. So they would fit into the independent unit category.
Close. It's a little bit of both. So it's independent units, but since we've partnered with Home for Good, there's the permanent supportive housing overlay. So there are actually PSH units happening right now at the guest house because Home for Good is a scattered site, not site specific PSH program. So it's a little bit different model, and it'll be interesting how we work, to capture that dynamically. There's the intention of the Barrett to have, partner with Home for Good, and other opportunities. I think we're going to be really having to figure out in a good way how we capture services that follow the person. So if you are in if you need PSH, do you have to go to a particular place, or can we make PSH come to you? And I think that's going to be a conversation we're having over the next year. So yes, and you are correct. And it's a little bit more.
Well, thank you so much for this presentation, and thank you for the wonderful questions. I think that I enjoy having these conversations about data, and I really enjoy that all of us and the groups that work on these types of projects really come at it from a people first perspective. And we all really do recognize that even though we're talking about numbers and we're talking about what the data is telling us, it's people. These are people who are somebody's brother, somebody's auntie, and it's really important to keep that at the front of our minds as we have these conversations about the data. And I do see, it's not really another question, but a follow-up comment in the chat. Yes, we do collect, when we do coordinated entry assessments, information about disabling conditions and demographic information. So that is something that's collected. And I think that we're always looking to do a better job of looking at what that data tells us and using that information to make good data informed decisions. And echo thanking everyone for all of the work that they did on all of this. So moving to good news and celebrations, if anyone has anything that they would like to share. We didn't have anybody in advance want to share anything, but anyone is welcome to unmute and share any good news and celebrations that you might have coming out of your program area or yourself. All right, any community events or anything that people would like to share that is upcoming for their agencies, their programs, or anything that they're involved in? Okay, well, on the screen, you'll see the upcoming January and February advocacy opportunities. I'll run through them fairly quickly, but we do have, I'm gonna start with the next thing after today. So the February 1st, the Housing, Homelessness, and Neighborhood Development, or the HAND Commission, is meeting. They meet on the first Wednesday of every month at the Health Department building at 825 L Street, and that is in person or also via Teams. On February 7th, we have the first regular assembly meeting of February. Those are held down at the LUSAC Library in the Assembly Chambers. You can go in person, or it is also live streamed via YouTube. The Assembly Committee on Housing and Homelessness meets Wednesday, February 15th next, and that also is a meeting held down at the LUSAC Library and in Assembly Chambers. And then following that is the second regular Assembly meeting for the month of February on Tuesday, February 21st. And our next meeting is Thursday, February 23rd. I hope that everyone got something valuable from this meeting, and I look forward to seeing everyone again. I do see, okay, I'm looking at the chat now here. share a few things we prepared to share here at our shelter documents. Yes, if you wanted to share them, if you have a link, if they're electronic, you can share them in the chat. If you wanted to send them to our group that does the administration of this meeting, we can get those distributed as well. However you'd like to share those, that is absolutely something you can do. All right, well, thank you everyone for everything that you do, for being here with us today, for all of the wonderful discussion and questions that we had. As always, volunteer opportunities can be found at bethechange907.org. And have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing everyone at February's meeting.